So hello and welcome to the Empowered Leaders in Tech podcast. Today I'm really excited because I get to invite a fellow guest speaker from the Women in Tech conference, but also somebody who is inspiring lots of people and sharing this incredible knowledge all about personal branding and why it's important. So today I'm joined by Ketaki. Ketaki is the host of the Personal Branding for Professionals video podcast. You can check out her channel over on YouTube, and she's also a conference speaker, as I said. Ketaki did personal branding for professionals so that she can spotlight these powerful personal brands that you see out there in other careers to inspire other professionals to build your brand, your profile, your visibility. So Ketaki is a true woman in tech. She works for Oracle as a software engineer under the AI team in the hospitality sector. She is incredibly committed, like me, to personal and professional growth. So we have so much in common and sharing this with other professionals to up-level them. So I'm incredibly honored, and I think this is going to be a fantastic podcast for our listeners. So thank you for joining me, Ketaki.
Thank you for having me, Sue, and I love your energy. I love the introduction that you've done for me. Absolutely love it. And it'll be great sharing a lot about personal branding in this episode today.
Absolutely, definitely. No, and to be honest, the energy is because you bring this, the things that you're sharing on your vlog, I cannot recommend more. It's made me think a lot about all sorts of aspects of personal branding that you wouldn't normally talk about. And I guess really that's what we need to talk about today, is a little bit more about who you are, where you come from, and your approach to personal branding. But first of all, perhaps let's start with telling us a little bit about your career journey into this.
Sure, absolutely. I would love to do that. So I currently reside in Mumbai, India, and I have a BTech in computer science and engineering. So I figured out pretty early in my life that computer science, I had an inclination towards it. So I got into the tech field, did my engineering, and then got placed in Oracle. So since then, I've been with the hospitality global business unit, and I changed a few teams before I could figure out that data science was the domain that I was interested in. So I'm currently working with the artificial intelligence team in the hospitality global business unit. And apart from that, I have around 4 years of corporate experience. So in these 4 years, one thing that I observed around me was that during weekends, most of the professionals felt purposeless. When all the work responsibilities were taken off their shoulders, they felt a void inside, and that was because they felt like they didn't have a purpose, or their entire identity was just confined to their professional accomplishments. So I thought I could change this a little through my YouTube channel. That's how I started my video podcast, and that's my journey.
Wow, that's incredibly powerful. I often say, you are not your job title. You know that thing where you go to a social event
Absolutely. Yes.
and they ask, what do you do? And I've noticed this when my husband transitioned from role to role, that he felt that he lost some of his identity because people associate you with your job title. That is incredibly interesting that you say when people get to the weekend, they feel an empty void because their purpose has gone. Almost like people are living for work and they don't have themselves outside of work.
Exactly. They've just lost their entire identity to their work, and it all revolves around just their professional accomplishments, their job titles, their positions, and it's just everything around it. And that's something that we want to change. We want to get that spark again. We want to get that spark alive in everyone, where they are much more than their job title, and that they find their strengths and share it with the world.
Absolutely. Okay, this is brilliant. Right. Well, so all right, then in your view, this is a completely different take on it than some professionals. So when you follow people on LinkedIn and they give you advice, it's very much honed in on the job, isn't it, that you do and your expertise. So in your view, what is personal branding all about?
All right. So personal branding, in very simple terms, if I have to define it in one word, it's your reputation, right? So we might have different ways of saying the same thing, but at the end of the day, it's just your reputation. And it's about what is the perception of the people around you, and does that perception match with your perception of yourself? So if you have a good personal brand, what others think of you will match with what you think about yourself. And a lot of times you might be observing around you that people think that they're someone else, but they're being projected and perceived as totally a different personality. So that's something that we want to avoid, because that leads to a lot of conflict, not only at workplace, but even in your personal life. So if you have a good personal brand, it's about sharing your story with the world for sure, but it's also about aligning what others think of you with what you think about yourself. That's just as simple as it can be defined.
That's incredibly important. I think there's a few there's a few tests you can do which actually look. So disc profiling I'm thinking of. Have you heard of profiling?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've
So the interesting thing is when you do have you done one of these
I've
disc?
done that, and I have been I think, yes, I have been in the I category.
Right, okay. So what's interesting though, but is it looks at how you think other people think of you, what they perceive of you, as well as
Yeah,
what you are in your own personal space, and then how you are at work. So I found that incredibly interesting to know that in some situations you might be, and we talked about this about confidence with Suzanne Doyle Morris, about how in certain situations you're confident, you're extrovert, and in others you're more introvert. And I think you can see that dynamic with people at work and people at home, and then it's not because they've changed the person they are, it's because they think that people perceive them as one way in one situation and then they try and adjust their
yeah.
behavior. Yeah.
It's just
Oh,
a
this.
mask that we wear when we go to work in terms of professionalism and everything, but then we lose ourselves in the process. And over years, as soon as we reach 25 years or maybe 30 years, I think by that time you totally lose the sense of what you liked or what you were inside. It's just around your job title. It's just those completing those deadlines and meeting those deadlines. It just revolves around that, which is a
Yeah,
very interesting.
that's a very interesting choice of phrase. You lose part of yourself, and
Yeah,
that perhaps this midlife crisis that you have in your career, definitely some people have it earlier, some people later, but that midlife crisis itself, I don't know why I ended up doing this, I don't even enjoy it, this isn't me. And then some people throw it all away and go and open a B&B in France or somewhere. That's it's one of those sorts of idyllic lifestyles that reality you don't want to do that. It's just, yeah, you've lost a part of yourself. Okay, I love that mask. Yeah, it's putting on a mask. What I find is sometimes some people tell me, and I've experienced this myself, being in the boardroom for a large chunk of your day or presenting takes a lot out of you. And I
mm,
think because some people are being somebody else, they're self-regulating a lot, and self-regulation is exhausting.
yeah.
I sort of compare this to when you're at the in-laws having dinner. You're not yourself when you're with the in-laws because you're regulating your behavior a little bit, especially in the early days. So you don't want to stand out as being the bad one. So people say that's exhausting. And I think when you're trying to be somebody else, it is exhausting and draining on you as
It's
well.
absolutely exhausting, and eventually people are going to find out what the true nature of yours is, because it's going to come up when you're frustrated, it's going to come up when you feel burned out, it's going to come up someday. So it's always better. It's not very easy for sure to be yourself at your workplace. It takes a lot of courage sometimes, it takes a lot of vulnerability at times just to bring your true self to work. But
Absolutely.
even then, you have to try and do it so that have you can give your best self to work and you can really progress in your career. That's where the growth lies.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think sometimes we confuse best self with an authenticity. We confuse them with being too open, don't we? But
Right.
there's
Yeah, there definitely has to be, you to draw a line wherever needed, but it can definitely be done, and it's again an intentional choice that you make every day.
absolutely. Okay, brilliant. Well, so but before we get on to how do we start to build the right sort of personal brand, what would be really good is from your perspective, why do you think it's important to people's career progression, or should they continue to do what you say and sort of limit themselves, deliver to the deadlines and just focus on that rather than focusing on the person they are and letting that shine through? Why do you think it's important?
Right. So that's a very important question, and I think it has to be talked about more and more in every conversation. One thing that I've observed is there are two kinds of people mainly at workplace. One set of people who put their head down and just work, and the other people who get their work done, but they also socialize, they network, they talk to people, and they make sure that they're projecting their credibility at work. They're talking about their accomplishments all the time. They're talking about their plans. So there are these two kinds of people, and what happens with the former set of people is that they think that they are doing well, but people have some perceptions and nothing is ever communicated. So it's only during the appraisal at the end of the year that they understand that their manager thinks that their work is not creating that much of an impact, or maybe they're not fulfilling their responsibilities to the best of their capabilities. So that comes as a shock, because this person thinks that I've been doing everything that I could and this is my job. So I think where personal branding comes into the picture is being accountable versus being responsible. So you can just think about your job duties, put your head down and work, and that can still be okay. But if you're accountable, you would take ownership of the work that you're doing. You would try and help your team. You would try to have a good rapport with everyone. You would talk to your manager about your career development plan, maybe. You would solicit feedback from your colleagues to make sure that you're growing, and to make sure that you're empathizing well with your work, with your colleagues, and also that you're not offending anyone's feelings. So when personal brand comes into picture, you are very intentional of what others are thinking about you, and it's just that slight change of mindset that is required. Doesn't require a lot of work, but it's just that slight change of mindset which can help you to understand how can I communicate well, so that I can project myself, my true self, at the workplace. So talking more about your accomplishments, gathering feedback, working on it, reaching out to people, that can make a huge difference in boosting your career growth. And it is just with a few strategies that you can transform the entire way that people look at you.
Do you ever find, so I was definitely the first person that you talked about initially, and then I realized that wasn't working. More
Right.
on that another time. But do you ever find there's a perception that the second type of person can sometimes be seen from the first type of person as being, well, we don't want to brag. I don't want to be that person that stands in the office talking all day.
Absolutely.
I'm right to get on with my work and be, diligently working conscientiously while they're gossiping. And do you feel like maybe there's a perception and there's a balance between too much of going one way or something?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there definitely is a balance. So you don't want to keep talking all the time about your accomplishments and not doing anything, right? So the first part definitely is you being productive at work, you handling all the challenges, solving the problems that come your way. You have to ace that. And that's the first aspect. That's the foundation of everything that you do. But about that, wherever you can, the way that you interact with people, being kind to people, talking to your manager about your plans. No one does that. So people usually get intimidated by their managers. But treating your manager as a partner in your career growth and saying that, hey, I need that promotion, hey, I need that hike, that is something where you're speaking up for yourself and showing that you have to be valued at workplace. That's how you solicit that value. And in a world that is increasingly getting open and open nowadays, it's very, very important to speak up, because that way people know what you want, they know what you stand for, and they know what your values are. So it's also about being very true to your values and speaking up wherever necessary, not speaking up all the time, but finding that right situation where you can talk about your accomplishments in a very subtle way, not about bragging or not offending someone, but just stating facts that can help people understand what is the value that you bring to the table.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And if you were to stay in that former state of working
Mhm.
hard and hoping somebody will recognize, what might happen with that person if you carry on with that?
So and I was that person when I started my career as well, and then I realized it was not working, just like you. So what happens that way is you get to this point where you feel that you're giving in a lot, but you're not getting what you deserve, and that eventually then leads to burnout or frustration or just lack of purpose, because you don't understand what you're doing. You feel that you're doing everything right, but you're not getting the right results. So in that case, I think that is a very important aspect that you think about it, because it's not a very good place to be in, where you think that you're putting in your best effort, but someone else is getting the promotion when you should have gotten it, right? So you have to set the base for that. You have to talk to people. You have to make sure that they understand that this is your priority, that you're committed and you're delivering through this. And sometimes people don't understand the challenges that you've overcome when you're doing a work. So when you accomplish something, make sure that others understand what went into achieving that, or what went into solving that problem, how challenging was it. and then they eventually realize that, okay, this was a very challenging task and you did it very well. So then they start valuing you. So it would take a little bit of effort towards the beginning, but once you have established that brand for yourself, then it becomes easy because people start perceiving you that way.
Absolutely. So we started to talk now about how we start to build that personal brand. But if you were to break it down, what stages do you think we have to go through to build a really good personal brand for our career progress?
Okay, sure. So when we talk about personal branding, there are two things. Usually, this term it has a lot of misconceptions around it, and the first misconception is that it's only for entrepreneurs. So if you go back to a decade ago, I think people used to share their business cards and say, "Hey, this is my service, this is my email, this is the service that I offer." So their entire personal brand was just restricted to that business card. But nowadays, when we are living in the digital age where it's so easy to share your story with the world, you have so many different platforms, you have social media to start just sharing a little aspect of your life with everyone around you. So when it's so easy, I think we should take an intentional effort to do that. Even 5 minutes every day would be more than enough. So first, you have to start with that intention that you will be consistent and you will give just 5 minutes every day. That should be more than enough because consistency is all that is required. The other thing is, how do you interact with the people around you? Because usually people think is that personal brand is just about your content, or it's just about what your purpose is. But personal brand is also about how you talk to the other people, your empathy quotient, in other words. So how can you understand the people around you? How well are you dwelling with them? How well are you respecting them? If you're being arrogant, that's a very bad sign for your personal brand. It's not going to make any difference if you still share content, right? So if you're being very condescending or patronizing, that's not going to help. So that aspect should definitely not be forgotten. You have to be good to people around you. You have to be mindful if you're hurting them. So make sure that you keep your assumptions aside when you're talking to people and try to understand through their story, why do they do what they do, or why do they behave or react a certain way in that situation. That's one aspect. Coming to the content part, at your work, as I said, you have to project your accomplishments and feedback. So accomplishments and feedback, these are the two foundations through which you can really grow in your career, and make sure that you don't get those sudden shocks where people are thinking something else and you think that you're doing great. So just to avoid those shocks in the middle of your career, you have to have maybe weekly, monthly feedback with your colleagues where you're trying to find out, is there anything that I can improve on, and then again follow up with them after you have an action plan to address that feedback. And then in terms of the content that you want to generate, so if you have a mission that you want to share with your world, for instance, I am working in tech, but then I also want to talk about personal branding all the time. So there has to be some effort on my side where I can showcase that I am trying to learn more about this subject, right? So in terms of generating content, then you can choose any one of the platforms, choose the mission that you want to start sharing with the world, and that mission can be a very a vague mission. When you begin, it's totally fine to begin with a vague mission, and it slowly solidifies as you continue generating content, as you interact with people around you, and then you understand this is what I'm passionate about. Because it's very difficult to know all of it when you begin, but you figure it out along the way. So I think these three aspects, interacting with people, and having the empathy quotient in you when you do so, and generating the content consistently, keeping it aligned with your mission. And you can choose any social media platform to just start with, but being consistent, and at the same time accomplishing things at work, talking about your accomplishments, and getting feedback at work. So these three aspects together, they would give you a very fulfilling experience in defining who you are to the world.
Mm. It's interesting. So you talked there about how you're from other people's point of view. So
Right.
are you saying that emotional intelligence is necessary to build a personal brand at work?
Absolutely necessary, and that aspect is somehow ignored when people talk about personal brand. Because I've seen a lot of people talk about personal brand, but all they talk about is content and finding your why and how would you share that why with the world. But it's also equally important that you behave well with people, you interact well, you understand what they're going through, and that you're not totally blind to what they're feeling, because we have our own blind spots, and that has to be accepted. But dealing with those blind spots and accepting that you don't know what you don't know, and going ahead with that, that is very, very important. Especially, I think during the pandemic, that's a necessary question that our eyes have opened up to.
It's very interesting. Yeah. We don't, yeah. So, one element that I think is incredibly important to progress somebody's career is the ability to influence others. And it starts with that relationship and looking at it from their perspective and thinking, well, why would they even want to do this thing that I'm trying to persuade them to do? And it's
Yeah,
interesting that you say in terms of personal branding, to have that connection, you need to also, understand the other person's point of view and be empathetic. So it's all sort of all these skill sets you realize they cross over so much, and once you've established your core basic skills, you can
yeah.
almost do anything with your career, with your business. And then it's the mindset, isn't it, behind the scenes that says,
Yeah, it's all the game of the mindset. Once you have the mindset right, you can achieve the other things. So it is generally viewed as a very complicated task building your personal brand, but it's really simple once you begin. You just have to begin, and even if you give 5 minutes every day, just with that intention that you want to define yourself or you want to work on yourself. It's all about working on yourself. And
mm,
then towards the end, you start feeling the power that you have within you. You start feeling that my work doesn't define me. That's just one part of me. And I can tell you that when you're personally fulfilled, it equally translates to professionally well as well, because once you have that personal fulfillment within you, you start performing well at work, because now you know that you know yourself better, so you're able to give a better version of yourself to the workplace. So that's an important correlation that I didn't realize, but it definitely exists.
100%. Yeah, in my view, you show up more present. You
Right,
show up
you're more
more.
mindful. Yeah,
Exactly. More self-awareness, more awareness of the others around you. Absolutely. Yeah,
yeah,
100%. So you talked about so this element of getting feedback and also communicating your accomplishments. And then
yeah.
you talked about you can find a social media platform to do some stuff on as well. And then you can start getting content out there. But let's say I'm in an organization and I'm thinking, well, I just want to get noticed here. I just want to be known for the work I'm doing here. How what sort of ways would you say you can do that in your organization internally?
Right. So when it comes to just the internal organization and the demographic, I think the first thing definitely would be understanding the scenario. So it might certain times it might be a meeting with a lot of people, and at that time it wouldn't be behooving for you to just start talking about your accomplishments, because that would be just being too selfish. So you definitely have to understand your situation and surroundings well. But the very first thing is having a good rapport with your manager, because your manager is going to be the one who's going to connect you to opportunities, who's going to help you climb that corporate ladder, as we call it. So you have to make sure that your manager values you and is aware of your accomplishments. So what I did was I have bi-weekly check-ins with my manager, so I don't rely on the annual appraisal process for my manager to understand what I do. What I prepare is I have bi-weekly check-ins with him, and in those calls I prepare an agenda where I discuss that this is what I've done in the last 2 weeks. These are the challenges that I've overcome, and these are some of the things that I think can still improve in the team, and these are the solutions. So I don't just bring problems, but I bring what are the possible solutions with my experience level that I can do. I know that there can be better solutions at times, but at least I present something from my perspective. And it's always talking about my perspective, saying that this was my accomplishment, but I learned this out of it. So when you make it as a learning opportunity, it doesn't sound like an accomplishment, and at the same time it gets the message across. And especially as women, I've seen that as women we hesitate to talk about our accomplishments, and we don't apply for a job unless we qualify all of the eligibility criteria that exists, right? So that kind of a mindset is inherent in women. I don't know why, but it just is there. So just to overcome that, what we have to do is start speaking up in a way that you can make a story out of it. So you can talk about your accomplishments, say what you've learned out of this and what you plan to do with it in the future, and that way it becomes a fact, and at the same time it gets the message across that you've done this much for the company, and that you should be valued, and you should be considered for the next opportunity. So once you've started doing those calls, I think after a series of 10 to 12 calls, you get in a position where you can start asking for things, where you can say, you know what, I'm not happy with my financial situation. I need a raise. You know what, I think I'm ready for that team. I see a good opportunity in that team. I want to work with that team. I'm ready for this project. So you have to start nominating yourself personally for all those opportunities. And I can tell you that managers respect that a lot more, because not a lot of people speak up at their workplace. But when you speak up and when you are so well prepared in these meetings where you're projecting your accomplishments, it shows. It shows through your efforts. And then all of that is being valued, and then you get what you deserve. And that is a very empowering feeling which everyone out there should be having. We all need what we deserve, and we should get it. We should get more of it. And for that, we have to do a little bit of work in getting over that hesitation, going out of your comfort zone, and starting just to share that I've done this, and feeling comfortable in that scale.
I love that. Just listening to that makes me think, actually, it's within your control. You can do something about it, because I think there's probably a few things going through people's heads. So my manager might not be very supportive. I don't think my manager's going to support me. If I go to them and tell them I want a promotion, they're probably not going to. But I think that what you've described there is a process that they might not on day one, but by the time you've had this meeting with them, 3 months, 6 months down the line, you have told them, I love that process you just said. You said, was it, this is what I did, this is my accomplishment, and this is what I learned from it.
Exactly. Right.
that that's really good framing for somebody who doesn't like to boast about, I did this, it's, and you're right. Some people, and this is what I was getting at the beginning, your person who works hard and wants somebody to just recognize, I'm working hard, I did amazing things, to the person who stands in the office and shouts about it from the rooftops, I improved X, I did Y. And we look at that person and go, oh, shut up, we're not, go and just get on with it like the rest of us. When you're
Yeah.
right, if you can frame it and be comfortable framing it like that,
Yeah.
I did this and this is what I learned from it. Wow, your manager is probably going to be sat there going, oh wow, this person's really, really learning, really upping their game, they're developing, maybe they're ready for the next level. And when you ask, it's a light bulb moment.
And there's another perspective to it, that when we present it as facts, it doesn't sound as bragging. You're just presenting facts that are working in favor for you, and you've prepared those facts already, so those are working in favor for you. But these are facts. When you say that I improved the outcome of this project, and I this project was overall productive, we completed it in 20% lesser time, then that's a fact, and that happened because of you. So it no one is going to discredit that. And also that when you start speaking up in this way, when you start sharing your accomplishments, it also is a very good sign for others to speak up, because you are inspiring others, saying that this is possible, you can do this. And then you light up the path for others to follow, because you're showing them, you're leading through action, and you're showing them that you can talk, you can share this. It's okay to do that at workplace. So that has to be normalized. And as I said, it's not going to happen in one meeting. It'll take you 1 year, sometimes it'll take you 2 years, but eventually you'll get into the mindset of being comfortable sharing and talking about yourself. And that's an absolutely important skill to have in this century.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, role modeling the way. Yeah, I love that. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I guess for anybody who can't remember all the accomplishments they had, maybe we need to reflect on it a bit more often and think, what did I do this month? What have I done this week that's awesome? And write it down. Or, I mean,
Yeah.
how do you keep a record of these things? How do you make sure you don't lose track of all the amazing things you've done all week? Oh,
That's
yeah.
a great point. Yeah, documenting your accomplishments is definitely the first step, because you cannot talk about your accomplishments unless you document them. And that's the reason that appraisals fail, because at the end of the year you don't remember what you did all year round, and then you miss out on the most important aspects of your accomplishments. So what I do is I document my accomplishments every day. And I know it's not easy, but I've just gotten into that mindset after doing it for 6 to 7 months, that before I close my laptop for the day, I try to document and reflect on whatever has happened. So it might be just 2 to 3 keywords, but that helps me to keep a track of what happened on that day. So there's a notepad or Excel sheet, whatever you want to maintain, but that you can have it for every day. Just jot down what happened today. It might be something that concerned you about the team's culture. That can also be a great point to write down, just so that you can work on it with your manager. Or maybe it might be something where you were able to mentor someone. That's also a good point. Write it down. So it might be a very small accomplishment. At some days there might be no accomplishments at all, and some days there might be some very big accomplishments that you want to remember and definitely bring up an appraisal. But no matter what happens, if you start getting into the habit of journaling it every day, even 2 to 3 points just before shutting down your laptop, that should be more than enough to prepare you well for all of your bi-weekly meetings. And definitely getting feedback from colleagues, not only from your manager but also from your colleagues, that's going to help a lot in this process when you start documenting everything.
Well, I mean, you've obviously said there that before then to make sure that you're making it normalized, talking about your achievements, the things that we've done,
Yeah.
and how would you do that in the team? So we've got our team manager. We're going to meet with bi-weekly or weekly, and we're going to talk to them. But how do you sort of integrate that into your team a little bit more, or your your colleagues?
Right. So after I have my bi-weekly check-ins with my manager, I do share it with the team, and I encourage them to do that as well, because not everyone has this idea of having to talk regularly, and they don't understand the importance of it unless the appraisal comes at the end of the year. So I talk to a lot of people. I tell them that this is what you should do. Maybe you should give it a try. For some people, it's monthly. For some people, it's once in 3 months. But whatever it is, anything is better than just meeting once in a year and then discussing why you failed or why you succeeded. So managers also appreciate when you go that extra step to do that. So I encourage my colleagues to do that, and then I also set up these monthly check-ins with my team members whenever possible. It might be monthly, sometimes it might be once in 3 months, but whenever it's relevant, if there's something that we need to discuss, if there's even if there's a conflict that has arisen, then that needs to be mitigated as well. So I set up these calls with my colleagues, which is just to check in, and especially during the remote work, it goes a long way in understanding that you really care about the other person. You care about what they think, you care about what they're feeling, and if you can help them in any way. So it starts with that. Can I help you? Do you want something from me? Am I doing good? Do you think I can improve on something? And everyone appreciates when you're polite and you're asking for feedback, because they know that you want to improve. So through all of this, even when you're talking about your accomplishments or even when you're asking for feedback, one thing that is definitely reflecting is that you want to improve and that you care about your career and that you're very passionate about growing. So that is the general impression that everyone will start having. So you have to encourage people around you to have these weekly check-ins or bi-weekly check-ins, whatever works with them, but just to have an arrangement with your manager. And whenever possible, talk to your team members apart from work and try to understand what they're feeling. Are you doing good? Can you improve? Are you hurting them in any way? That goes a long way in humanizing the workplace, because these days we are all about just doing our work and shutting our laptop down and not talking to anyone. But we need that connection to be really successful at workplace.
Absolutely, yeah, 100%. Definitely agree. I've also seen other things work well where, on a wider business context, where updates, so it's departmental updates that go out to wider business users, maybe of your system, or changes to your infrastructure or whatever you're doing. I've also seen it done really well where we showcase our achievements in that. So there'll be a call out to this project delivery or this incredible timeline
Yeah,
or this saving, and even calling out the members of staff I find really beneficial. And I've also found that if you have the opportunity, or if somebody in your team delivers, even your manager delivers an update to directors or to boardroom suite or decision makers,
yeah,
make sure those accomplishments are on there. So, the tone of the meeting is set by, okay, we're going to talk about what the priorities are for the next quarter and what we're going to be working on. But a brief showcase of these are the accomplishments of the department and the team, and call outs
yeah.
is so valuable. So, it's like getting that, to me, getting that name and getting that accomplishment in front of key decision makers is about building your allies across the business. You want
Absolutely.
you want people to talk about you for what you want to be known for. And I always think if you can get that message far and wide, and everybody can see that you contributed to that big thing that was delivered, because quite often IT, we're behind the scenes, we're in the code, nobody knows what
Yeah,
you did, your contribution is invisible, all I see is a screen.
absolutely. Yeah, that happens, and I'm glad that you brought this point up, because it's essential to go beyond your team as well. It's not just about your team, about your manager, because eventually we get into the comfort zone again, where we are just talking to our manager, we're talking to our team members, and then we don't care what happens outside of our team. But it's equally important to network with people outside of your team, and to also bring up this point in your check-ins with your manager where you're saying, I don't feel appreciated, or I need more appreciation, I need more visibility. So maybe you can talk about my accomplishments and share this with your manager, or take it to the higher management. And that way you start expanding your circle, you start expanding the number of people that know you for what you do. And that is absolutely essential in building your brand at work.
I love that about having this open conversation with your manager. I'm not
Yeah,
appreciated.
and
Or,
you eventually get into that comfort zone when you start meeting your manager every day. You start getting into that comfort zone where you can talk about these things, that I don't feel very motivated right now. These are the reasons, and maybe you and I can work on this because I want to be happy when I come to the workplace. So these things definitely work out then.
that's fantastic advice. Thank you, Ketaki. It's really great talking to you. I think we could go on for half a day, but I'm conscious of your amazing time. Perhaps we can do a follow-up session or something for the listeners. So let us know how you're getting on, how you're enjoying this, and what you're taking away in the comments underneath this one. So let's close with, how can people learn more about you and your mission and your vlog and connect with you, Ketaki?
Right. So the best place to find me is on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn, and if anyone needs any help in terms of building credibility at work or even building their personal brand, I would love to help, because that's been my mission. And apart from that, I have a YouTube channel. So I think I'll give you the links and you can share it in the podcast show notes. But people can definitely watch my videos on YouTube, because I've talked to a lot of people, and there are some great insights on that channel where people have talked about accomplishments, strategies to share your accomplishments. They've talked about personal branding. So I think it's a great consortium of all the content that there is out there for personal branding. So I would definitely recommend our listeners to go and check it out if they are interested to know more about this topic.
I would urge people to do that. It's the most in-depth, far and wide discussion all about personal branding. There'll be so many things that resonate. I was listening to it about storytelling, and I was thinking that's really interesting. So there are so many elements you can pull in that will probably fit with your personality as well, because I would imagine we all approach personal branding slightly different depending on where our strengths and weaknesses are. And that conversation with the manager and building your comms up and learning how to sell that story is all incredibly important. So I'll definitely post the link underneath. Ketaki, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a fantastic discussion, and I can't wait to talk to you again another time.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me. It was really great, and this is a topic that I'm so passionate about. I love talking about it. Had a great conversation.
You can tell it's fantastic. Take care, folks, and I will see you again very soon. Thanks, Ketaki.
Thank you. Bye.